Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Chassidus in the morning, 15 minutes. Hachana for Pesach. Finishing up the Maamer over here. I'll probably finish it tomorrow. So we're in the middle of a question. So basically, we discussed in the Maamer that why do we say Matza Zu that this matzah that we eat is because we didn't have time to rise. But seemingly we're eating the matzah because the Yidden in Mitzrayim ate matzah. So I have to explain, this is all really according to Alter Rebbe, that the reason is because there's two types of matzah. There's matzah before midnight and matzah after midnight. The matzah before midnight is matzah without a vav, meaning without God's revelation. And it has to be guarded. It has become chametz. And our matzah is not, it doesn't really relate to that matzah. So there's a deeper matzah, which is the matzah that's after chatzos, which is after Hashem revealed himself, which is the matzah with the vav. And it also talks about that matzah. It says, Ki lo chametz, because by itself it couldn't become chametz, because once God revealed himself, it was very obvious, and God and clarity was there, so therefore you can't have the ego get in the way. And that's essentially why our matzah is like that. The Rebbe asked a question, or the Rebbe sort of points out that actually our matzah today is even greater than that second matzah, because our matzah came out of a year full of Torah mitzvahs, that we were spending a year Torah mitzvahs. So we're full of mitzvahs. So we have we're more ready to receive. So our matzah is even greater. And he says, in order to help us understand this, he explains it's like the contrast between Pesach and Shavuos. The Pesach, it's basically God revealing himself, and it's all coming from above without our efforts from below. Whereas on Shavuos, it's after 49 days of working, and really ultimately we reach the 50th level, not just the 50th level that's connected to the lower part of it, like the lower part of the 50th level, which connects to us, but even the higher level within the 50th level. And we talked about it, so 50th level is like a representation of Keser. And so essentially what we're saying is sort of a third type of matzah, which is our matzah that we eat today, which is much greater. So then the Rebbe asked the question that if that's the case, then why are we comparing, so the main question, or the first question is, so how are we comparing our matzah to what it was before? Shouldn't we compare our matzah to what it is now? That we put our matzah much greater. So he said it's simple. No, because we're not talking about now. We're talking about then and what happened then. And so that's like the first answer, but still doesn't really answer. And we're going to explain it later. It doesn't really truly answer it, because if we're talking about the matzah back then, the matzah back then is the matzah before chatzos. So why are we talking about the matzah back then that's after chatzos? So the first explanation Rebbe gave, which is simple, it's that we're talking about what happened then. And now we're going to go deeper. And the deep answer we started explaining is that because deep down, essentially, not even deep down, just essentially, the reason why we're free from Egypt is not because of we did anything, because like we've been explaining, we didn't do any avodah. It was because God came and took us out. So essentially, we still have that Egyptian mentality. We still have that ability to go back into Egypt, or to be stuck in Egypt. Only because of God's kindness, he took us out. That's why we're out of there. And on page 14. Therefore, I'll do it from the top. Therefore, even though we live after the Geula of Mitzrayim and after the giving of the Torah, we can still relate to the state of the Jews, the state that the Jews were at the point of time. Because we, on our own, are potentially still in that state. We're still in the state of Mitzrayim, potential. Since we are still potentially in this state, we describe our matzah as it relates to the Jews when they were actually in that state. So we describe how they were back then. Even though that God says that our pre-midnight matzah, which we eat at the Seder, also has advantage of the post-midnight matzah, which the Jews ate when they left Mitzrayim, which seemingly breaks the rules of the Haggadah, only speaking about events that were at that time. Because if we're talking about at that time, it was the matzah before midnight, not the matzah after midnight. So why are we referring to our matzah that we eat before midnight about the matzah after midnight? Because both of these qualities were present during the overall process of the Jews living in Mitzrayim. Because essentially they were all there. Both those things were there. Meaning, yeah, one was before midnight, one was after midnight, but they both were there. So you're not going against the rule of talking about what happened then by talking about the matzah after midnight, because after midnight was also then. So therefore, our matzah is greater. But the reason why we don't talk about our matzah, we're talking about their matzah, is because that's how it was then. The reason why we're talking about the greater matzah back then is because we're still referring to the matzah. We're just talking about the better one. So the advantage of fulfilling a pre-giving of the Torah mitzvah to eat matzah in Mitzrayim was present in the pre-midnight matzah, and the second thing was the advantage of the fact that the dough didn't have time to rise, wasn't able to rise because of the tremendous revelation of godliness at that time was present in the post-midnight matzah. So we're explaining it so we can take both of those advantages: the advantage that it was before midnight, and the advantage of wasn't able to rise. So therefore, even though that Agada points out that our pre-midnight matzah is different from their pre-midnight matzah, it only points out advantages that exist during the original Pesach, even though they did not exist in the same combination that we have now. So what's Agada showing us? Why is he using the second example? It's not really the second example. They're just taking the positives of both examples. The positive, the pre-midnight matzah, which is the doing a mitzvah before Hashem commanded, and the post-midnight matzah, which is doing the mitzvah in a way that you don't, in the ability that the matzah has to not be able to rise. So even though it's not mentioned God in this exact way. So our matzah has an additional advantage. In addition to these two advantages from the original Pesach, we also have an advantage of fulfilling the mitzvah of eating matzah after the giving of the Torah. So even though the Jews were given the mitzvah to eat matzah before they left Mitzrayim, at the time of the giving of the Torah, the matzah reached a much higher level. So this makes the post-giving of the Torah matzah to eat matzah. This makes the post-giving of the Torah mitzvah to eat matzah greater than that pre-giving of the Torah matzah that we eat a mitzvah to eat matzah. A little bit of tongue twister. But what we're saying is that ours has an additional advantage that it's after the giving of the Torah. So our matzah has an additional level. So furthermore, when we eat matzah, it also resembles the non-obligatory eating of matzah on the seventh day of Pesach, which resembles the eating of the matzah in the times of Mashiach. So he says also our matzah that we eat these days is also has this level connected to Shiur Pesach, which is Mashiach, which is also voluntary because we won't need to be commanded to fulfill the mitzvahs that we will do, and we will do them out of our own natural desire for godliness. Just like when Mashiach comes, we'll do everything by nature. We won't have to be told to do it. We'll just do it by nature. So too, the matzah, which is voluntary on the last days of Pesach, will have the same thing. Even though the Rebbe specifically mentions the eating of matzah on the voluntary on the seventh day of Pesach, according to Allah, eating matzah is voluntary on all days of Pesach, except for the first days. Besides the first days, every other day it's not an obligation, but it's voluntary. However, since the fact that eating matzah is voluntary in the last 6 days of Pesach is derived from the pasuk, which speaks about the seventh day of Pesach, and how do we know that the other 6 days of Pesach it's not an obligation to eat matzah? It's because of we learn it out from the Shiur Pesach. This shows that the voluntary eating of matzah is specifically connected to the seventh day of Pesach, which is in connection with the coming of Mashiach, as explained in other places. So this is connected with the Shiur Pesach, because we're learning it out from Shiur Pesach, and Shiur Pesach is all about Mashiach. So therefore, we're showing that eating the matzah nowadays that has a connection to the voluntary aspect of it. It shows that our matzah is also connected to Mashiach. So our matzah is so much greater than their matzah. And we finish it off. We have some time. We'll finish this off. May it be Hashem's will that we merit the immediate coming of Mashiach, especially considering the fact that we will now conclude with the giving of tzedakah. Because the Rebbe said the Maamer during the week, because the Rebbe gave tzedakah afterwards, which hastens the geula. The Rebbe distributed dollars for tzedakah after the Maamer. The fact that we are concluding with tzedakah, which is connected to Mashiach, because giving tzedakah hastens Mashiach's coming, is similar to the fact that the entire holiday of Pesach concludes with the seventh day of Pesach, which is connected to Mashiach, as mentioned above. And outside the land of Israel, it concluded with the Achon Shel Pesach, the 8th day of Pesach, a day on which the ray of Mashiach is shining, which is why the Baal Shem Tov would have Isuras Mashiach on the last days of Pesach. It was connected with Mashiach. So this is why the Haftarah we read on the last days of Pesach speaks about the coming of Mashiach. So we see everything's connected with Mashiach. And our matzah has a connection to Mashiach as well. So it should be, and also we're giving tzedakah, the Rebbe says, so it should be that through us giving tzedakah, and through this, all what we're talking about, Mashiach should come very soon, immediately. The fact that the last days of Pesach is the 8th day of Pesach also emphasizes this connection to Mashiach, as is shown by the following pasuk in the Haftarah. It says in the Haftarah, and it shall come to pass on that day, that on that day Hashem shall continue to apply his hand a second time, like he did when he redeemed them from Egypt, to acquire the rest of the people. Hashem used his hand to acquire the people that will remain from Assyria and from Egypt and from Pasrais and from Cush and from Elam and from Shinar and from the Hamas and from the islands of the sea. All different places that the Yidden have found, that Hashem will come and use his hand to sort of take them out of their galus where they are and bring them. The pasuk lists 7 locations of galus: Assyria, Egypt, Pasrais, Cush, Elam, Shinar, and Hamas. 7. As well as the 8th location, the islands of the sea. Hashem will take the Jews from these 8 locations of Galus and bring them to the level of 8, which is beyond the level of 7, which represents nature, with the true and complete Geula. With this, the promise will be fulfilled in a literal way, complete with all its details, and in a lasting and true way, that the land will be filled with the knowledge of Hashem as water covers the seabed. This pasuk is quoted at the end of Rambam's Mishnah Torah, and this Maamer was said on the Rambam's birthday. Shkoyach, Mazel Tov. So yeah, just to do a quick summary. We summarized in the beginning, but essentially what we're saying is that our matzah today is on a greater level than the matzah they had back then. There's 3 levels of matzah, so to speak. There's the level before Chatzos, back then, which was commanded. And then there's the matzah after Chatzos, which has the advantage of the revelation of God, and the matzah that can't become chametz. And then we have the matzah that we eat, which is after Yiful of Aveda. And even more, it's like, we explain what that means, which is from Pesach to Shavuos, and Shavuos is much greater, and it's more internalized because of this. And we said, and ours has an additional, and the reason why on the night of the Seder we don't talk about our matzah, we're talking about the matzah that was then, was because we're not talking about what happens now, we're talking about what happened then. But the reason why we use the second example of matzah is because we're trying to show out both advantages of both of those matzahs. But ultimately, our matzah has much bigger advantage, and our matzah is connected with Mashiach, and Mashiach should come immediately, and we should give tzedakah, and Mashiach should come right now.